You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that had, has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and the Future Tech Health Podcast, and I have a great guest today. Her name is Sasha Stevens. She's the author of the Effortless Sleep Method. Website is sleepforlife.com. So Sasha, thanks for coming on. I know it's a bit late for you over there in the UK, but I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you, Richard. Thanks for inviting me. And it is a little bit late, but it's only 6 o'clock. I think I can manage to stay up for a bit longer.
Well, good. And I know people that have, or people that study sleep always tend to have their own sleep issues and sleep journeys. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience with sleep over the years and what's changed?
Absolutely. Yeah, my sleep journey, I suppose you could say, started way back when I was in university, when I was about 23 years old. For the first 23 years of my life, I slept like a baby. Never even thought about it. Like most people on this planet, I never really thought about sleep at all. Just something that happened every night. And then when I went to university, a combination of all sorts of things meant that a sleep problem kicked in. I started to have bad nights, and then a few more, and I didn't really know what to do about it. Ended up, as most people do, going to the doctor, getting some sleeping pills, and that's when things really went from bad to worse. And that was the beginning of a 15-year problem. It turned into real chronic insomnia, where I would go days and days and days without really any sleep at all. It took over my life for 15 miserable years. So yeah, that's the negative story of my insomnia.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about what you discovered about insomnia, not just for yourself, but for other people you've spoken to. Like, why does it, maybe it's obvious, but why does it take over people's lives? How does it take over their life? What's the descent into it like?
Insomnia itself, I mean, having a bad night of sleep, having the odd bad night of sleep, or even the odd run of bad nights, is completely and absolutely normal. And I think this is something we don't allow people to realize. We don't tell people enough, is that missing a night here or there it's just nothing. It's like, I don't know, like having a headache or a bad tummy or something. It's something that generally goes away on its own. The reason that people suffer, in my experience, the reason that people suffer for years and years and years sometimes, and the reason that I suffered for such a long time, is because of what we then do about it. We first of all imagine we have some enormously difficult problem to overcome, that we have some sort of disease that requires treating. We go to the doctor, we take drugs for it, we start throwing all sorts of things at the problem without actually realizing that the more you do about insomnia, sometimes the worse it becomes. It's a strange kind of irony with insomnia. The more attention you give it, the worse it can become. So people end up becoming obsessed with their problem. And of course, the worse the insomnia gets, the more obsessed they get. And the more obsessed they get, the worse the insomnia gets. And it's a horrible, vicious circle to get into. And this is, I think, why insomnia becomes so bad for people and goes on for such a long time. It's just a normal little run of bad sleep that we've done all the wrong things with, and managed to turn it into something that can be really chronic. It can almost last a lifetime if it isn't nipped in the bud.
So how did you end up coming out of it? What broke the cycle of not sleeping and worrying about it?
Well, for me, it was actually bizarrely, it was sort of like what do we call it, a freak accident. It was a bizarre experience where I'd been convinced to go away on a holiday, on a vacation for a couple of weeks. It was an adventure holiday, one of these ones where you do kayaking and you make a camp and you light fires and you learn how to tie knots and things like this. And I had 2 weeks away from my normal crazy routines, away from all the things I normally did, away from the bad sleep hygiene and the bad sleep routine that I'd set up at home. And I began to, away on the holiday, I actually began to sort of forget about my problem. And at some point, I kind of stepped back and could see the problem sort of from afar and realized that all that time I'd basically been feeding the problem myself. I'd been creating it myself in my mind. I could see just how much I had been doing to reinforce it and to keep it strong. With all the attention I'd been giving it and with all the things I'd been doing it, I could just sort of see it objectively, almost for the first time ever. Instead of being lost in the insomnia, I could see it from outside. And that's really when it all started to change for me. I put into place a few good habits. I sort of cut out some of the really bad things I'd been doing, like having naps all over the place and lying in really, really late in the mornings. I stopped taking all sleeping pills, and my insomnia started to disappear. And over the years, it became better and better and better until, well, I can quite honestly say right now, I think I probably sleep better than pretty much everybody I know. Whenever I talk to anyone,
oh wow,
everyone I speak to these days seems to be having problems with sleep, and I just don't. It's just become a thing of the past for me. What I do now is I just try to help people to get where I am. I help people to see what I've seen. That's my passion, really. It's my passion, helping people to see that great sleep is actually available for all of us. It's not, this is not some great disease that we need to treat with medicine or with some sort of special device. Sleep is an innate ability that we all have. We're all born with it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's still there. It's still perfect in every single one of us. And as the years go on, I become more and more and more convinced of this. No one is broken. No one has a disease. All they have is some unhelpful thinking and some unhelpful habits that are getting in the way of that, letting that natural ability to sleep come out and show itself. And my life. Yeah, sorry, carry on, Richard.
How did you have the fortitude to stick through it once you stopped taking sleeping pills and once you to stop taking naps and do all that stuff? Because it seems like someone may be told that advice and try it for a day and then feel even worse, and getting through that hump.
Getting over that first bit. The funny thing is about getting over insomnia, that first bit, going from really dreadful sleep, and this seems to be the case for most people almost everybody I deal with, going from really dreadful sleep to kind of okay sleep, that's actually quite easy. That's not a difficult thing to do. Really, getting some good sleep habits in place, for example, just a bit of good sleep hygiene, a bit of relaxation, and a little bit of positive thinking, is normally enough to take someone from a really desperate patch of sleep into something that's a little bit better. And from a little bit better, you can then start to grow the confidence. That's certainly what happened with me. I became a little bit better almost immediately. It's not the case that you have to have this. You've got no sleep and suddenly you need to go absolutely cold turkey with giving up the drugs, for example. That's something I would never ever recommend. In fact, it can be quite dangerous to give up sleeping pills immediately overnight like that. I'd always recommend cutting down extremely slowly. For one, because of sometimes the physical symptoms of dependency, but also just for your own peace of mind, for your own confidence. Because as you say, it's just too difficult for a person just to say, okay, gonna start sleeping better from now on, not going to take my sleeping pills anymore. From now on, they're all over. I would never suggest that. In fact, I tell people to cut down as slowly as they want, really, as slowly as they possibly can, just so that their confidence has a chance to catch up as they begin sleeping better.
So what are some of the things you mentioned, like sleep hygiene and sleep habits and timings? And
Yeah, I mean,
things like that?
there are three. I mean, I suppose my advice falls into sort of three categories. First of all, is sleep hygiene, and a lot of people have heard of sleep hygiene before, and a lot of people dismiss sleep hygiene because they feel like they've been there, done that. Yeah, sleep hygiene is just basically refers to sort of the going to bed habits, the being in bed habits, the things specifically to do with actually being in bed and the bedroom. These are things like not taking naps, getting up at the same time every day, these sorts of things. And now these are. I will just point out that I would never suggest that sleep hygiene would cure a chronic problem, and this is often why people reject sleep hygiene, because they try it a bit and it doesn't really make a great deal of difference. So they think it's not going to work for them, that their problem maybe is just too bad to be treated with something as simple as sleep hygiene. But I still recommend sleep hygiene is essential. It's essential. It's an essential sort of background step. I say that it's good for setting sort of the foundation for good sleep to happen. So getting those sort of going to bed habits really firm and really good help to just set that sort of like baseline that, okay, we're going to get the conditions just right for sleep to occur. We're going to get a nice strong association of bed and sleep to start kicking in. So that's what sleep hygiene is all about. The second thing I recommend is just getting The second thing I recommend is just to get a bit of relaxation going on. Now, I mean, I call it it doesn't have to be relaxation. I call it de-stressing, actually, because for some people, the relaxation they need to do is get a bit of exercise. But a lot of us have an awful lot of sort of physical tension going on. This is besides any type of emotional stress. I'm talking about the physical tension involved in, a lot of us sit all day, 8 hours in a chair, and by the end of the day, we're kind of all tense and curled up, and we probably need to let go of a bit of that tension. So I always recommend that everybody just incorporate some sort of relaxation into their day. It could just be a 30-minute walk, or it could be something like meditation. Once again, this is part of the sort of background conditions, just to make sure that everything's in place that for good sleep to occur. So, all other things considered, for all other things being equal, sleep will occur once we've got those background conditions right.
As it seems like people associate, my bed's uncomfortable, that's why I'm not sleeping, or the dogs bark and that's why I'm not sleeping. And those are things maybe that happen at night or during sleep, but I don't know if they're associating what happens during the day. Like, for instance, I didn't get any daylight today until several hours later because it was overcast, and I slept badly, and I didn't realize that could have affected my sleep. Or I had caffeine, 10 hours before I went to bed, but it still like killed my sleep. Or this happened during the day. It was really stressful, and that affected my sleep. Do people make the connection between what happens during the day and sleep, or really only the night and sleep? And do you see there's a connection between everything you do and sleep?
Well, first, there are 2 points there. One is that people make connections between everything and anything. When people are suffering with insomnia, they are generally their minds will search all over the place for a reason for this. They will possibly blame it on the caffeine they had in the morning. They might blame it on I don't know, a stressful day at work. They might blame it on the fact that they watched a television too late at night or whatever. And this is a tricky road to go down, really, because you can end up making all sorts of connections between all sorts of random things that really have nothing to do with your sleep whatsoever. We can always find a reason for why we didn't sleep that well that day. I advise people not to start making those connections, really, because they just lead you down a rabbit hole into all sorts of wild ideas. You'll end up never drinking coffee ever, or you'll end up never drinking tea. You'll end up never watching television. You'll end up never allowing yourself any stress whatsoever. Suddenly there'll be all these rules in place, and the likelihood was none of that was ever anything to do with the lack of sleep anyway. So that's the first thing I'd say, is that I don't recommend you start looking for what can it have been? What must it have been for why I didn't sleep tonight? That's not a helpful thought. But having said that, the other thing I was about to say is that when it comes to relaxation, most people assume that if you're doing relaxation for sleep, it's something you should be doing in bed and not during the day. It's something you do in bed. Okay, I want a relaxation method so that I can lie down in bed and get to sleep. So give me a relaxation method, the best one. And what I found is that very often this is basically a case of too little, too late. And the very best thing very often you can do as far as relaxation goes is to get your relaxation done during the day. Calm down during the day, get your exercise or your meditation or your yoga or whatever it is, or even just you're sitting down for 10 minutes and chilling out during the day. If you work on your general anxiety and background sort of tension levels during the day, when it comes to nighttime, there's not a lot left to do. So the chances of you lying there awake are much, much slimmer if you've got the relaxation done before you've ever got anywhere near the bed. That makes sense. Sorry, there were sort of 2 points I made there to do with it.
Yeah, well, go a little bit deeper on both. Why would relaxation out of the bed help you in the bed, and your other point as well?
Well, there's nothing wrong with doing a relaxation method, a relaxation technique in the bed at all. In fact, in my Sleep for Life course, I actually recommend several of them. I've got quite a lot of them. I've recorded them in my own voice. But a lot of people find, and I was actually one of these, that doing relaxation in bed is actually sort of counterproductive. I would almost always find that doing things in bed to make me sleep would wake me up, would make things worse. So the more I lay there trying desperately to relax, just the more and more and more awake I would become. And I see this again and again and again. And I think it's because when you lie down, when we go to bed at night, what we're looking for is then that natural ability to sleep to kick in. We want that natural impulse to just override us and allow us to sleep. So we don't really want to be doing anything very much in bed at all. In fact, one of the very best sort of relaxation methods I recommend is something I call doing nothing. This is literally doing nothing. I know it's a difficult one for us to get our heads around. So I sort of have a process of doing nothing that I take you through in the course. Sort of it's sort of like a spoken, almost like a technique. But I call the technique doing nothing because
you yell at people and say you're doing it wrong, all wrong.
That's exactly what I do. I shout at them. Because it's the best way to get someone to sleep is to shout at them. Go ahead. I was just saying that what I'm all about is allowing that natural ability to come out and seeing that sleep is not something we have to do. Sleep is something we don't do at all. Sleep is something that happens naturally when the circumstances are right. And the right circumstances don't necessarily involve doing something in bed like the right relaxation technique. Now, for some people, they love it. Great, they love it. So if you have a relaxation, if you like something to do in bed, do something in bed. But I'm also there for the people who have discovered that, wow, whatever I do in bed, it just wakes me up. It just makes it worse. I can't bear it. I can't bear to do techniques in bed. So that's why I tend to recommend that if you relax during the day instead, by the time you get to bed, you can be half asleep. These days, I'm half asleep before I've even put my head on the pillow. I lie down, I'm asleep within seconds. There's nothing left to do by the time I've got into bed, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get people towards. Not having a ton of things to do in bed at the end of the day.
What's your opinion on phones in bed, or phones in the room, or TV in the room, or things like that?
Yeah, I'm not
how disruptive are they? Or
well, this is something some people sometimes do. I recommend you don't do them. I don't look at phones in bed, and I don't ever watch television in bed. I have occasionally looked at my iPad in bed, but I try not to. I think it's not helpful. It's not a great thing to be doing anything in bed other than sleeping. I recommend that basically nothing. You don't do anything in bed except sleep or make love with your husband or your wife or your partner. Those are the only things I specifically really allow you to do in bed, because anything other than that is kind of teaching your body to associate being in bed with being awake. If you're checking Facebook just before you go to sleep, your bed is not associated with sleep. It's associated with all that conversation you had, or what somebody said, or some silly meme, or some annoying piece of news that you've just read. I mean, reading news in bed, I hear a lot of people do this. It's goodness, the news is full of so many bad messages.
That's the worst,
and the idea of reading the news just just before you go to bed. I mean, crikey, I can't imagine a worse preparation for sleep, really. So I recommend doing as little in bed as possible.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from readers and people that you interact with? What are some tough or interesting or unique cases you've had to help people on, and what was involved? Maybe a couple of case studies.
Well, yeah, it's when I wrote this book these years ago. I wasn't a professional writer. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how the book would be taken. I was pretty much astonished by just the level of success that's happened. So I'm continually amazed just by how much it's still helping people, that my advice is still helping people, because it just seems like common sense to me. So I've had a few interesting people. I think one of the cases I'm most proud of is a journalist who contacted me last year called Kate Edgley, who's a journalist for the Guardian newspaper here in the UK. The Guardian newspaper, I don't know if you know over there, it's a very, very big national newspaper, one of the biggest broadsheet newspapers we have in the country. And she contacted me to say that she's overcome literally decades of insomnia, she'd convinced herself that she had some sort of genetic disposition, because her mother had insomnia and her grandmother had insomnia, and all the women in her family had insomnia. And she was absolutely convinced that there was a genetic link in her family, and that's why she couldn't sleep. So I had a bit of a chat with her, and well, lo and behold, she completely overcame it. And last year she wrote a big, long article actually about her recovery, which was published in the Guardian newspaper. That was
really cool.
That was a really good moment for me, actually. I was very proud of that. As a result of that, I was asked to appear on Radio 4's Woman's Hour, which is a very big BBC Radio 4, which is it's one of the most popular radio shows in the whole country. That was a great one. And just recently, actually, although I can't mention any names, but I've been contacted by a very famous TV chef who's contacted me to say that my program's given him more good nights in the last month, I think he said, than he's had in the last 2 years, and he's possibly even going to be producing a television program about that. But this is a little bit hush-hush, so it all sounds a little bit like just a rumor at the moment. I'm afraid I can't give you the names, but
Gotcha.
Those are, hopefully, there could be a TV show coming.
So what's your program like, without giving the whole thing away? What's the skeleton or the framework of it?
Okay, well, it's I have sort of two options for people. I do, as I've said, as you know, you've talked about the book, where the book was sort of the basic, the sort of the basic cure, I suppose, that I wrote some years ago. The program, the online program, goes into a little bit more depth. Well, it actually goes into a lot more depth, and this is recorded in my own voice, because I realize not everybody's a reader. Not everybody wants to sit down and read 50,000 words. Some people want to be reassured by hearing a voice. They want to know that I'm a real person. They want to know that, this is all real. This all really happened. I really did overcome 15 years of insomnia. So I've recorded the entire program in my own voice. And it's a video program, and I tell people about my own story quite extensively. I show them what they're doing. This is obviously often quite an eye opener. I'll go through exactly what they might be doing wrong. What sorts of behaviors might actually be interfering with their sleep, and that's often when they'll start to realize, oh my goodness, I do this, I do that, I do all the things she's talking about. And having sort of shown everybody what they're getting wrong, I'll then show them how to get it right, which is with a series of steps that have been carefully designed to address all of those sort of issues that befall people that can mess with sleep. And they're not all about sleep hygiene. I mean, the sleep hygiene and the relaxation is just the beginning. The main crux of my advice is in changing the way you think about this problem. Really, we've barely talked about that, but that is my forte. That's where I think I'm different. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm offering the world, is a way to look at this problem in a completely different way. Well,
you alluded to that. You said the one lady said, "Oh, I thought it was genetic, and that was my lot in life." So, tell me a little bit about that. How do people? Give me some more examples. How do people think about insomnia or sleep problems, and how do you help them come around to a different way?
Well, generally they will. Sometimes they think, as Kate did, that she had a genetic disposition. They think that something's become, or they'll think that something's become broken in them. That there's a broken switch in their mind, that something has broken and can't go back on again. Sometimes they think they've been damaged by drugs. Sometimes they think they've literally caught a disease, or they think there's some hidden mystery cause, like it's because my father left when I was 8 years old and I feel betrayed, or it's because I was bullied when I was 16 at university, or they'll pin it on something, and they'll be desperately trying to find the hidden cause of this insomnia. Now what I do is basically, when people start coming to me with these stories like this, I kind of just ignore them, and I'll just say, yep, we've all got a story like that, basically, but follow the instructions anyway and see what happens. And it seems to turn out that no matter what story you've got, or what you are, no matter how convinced you are that something is the cause of your insomnia, people seem to recover at the same rate. It seems to have nothing to do with what your story's about. Some people recover faster and better than others, but it has nothing to do with what you assume that original cause was. So I just basically show people that they can get better. I show people generally within a couple of weeks, people have been getting some better sleep, and that alone is enough for them to go, right, I actually had a really good sleep last night. Actually, I didn't actually take any sleeping pills last night. I haven't done that in months. And that's all you need. You only need 1 or 2 nights, because if you've had 1 or 2 nights of really good sleep with no medication, that means you are okay. That means you are not broken. That means there is nothing wrong with you. Your ability to sleep is still perfect, and it's still there. And that's basically what I get people to see. That if I can get you to sleep one night, I can get you to sleep another night. If you can do it once, you can do it for the rest of your life. Instead
of just sleeping pills, do you have people that are on opioids to sleep, or marijuana or other things? And I don't know if anyone tells you that, but do you have people
they do
take those kind of drugs to sleep, and are you able to help them, or is that a harder thing that requires more intense counseling?
I do have these. I do have them a lot. A lot of people taking marijuana to sleep, an awful lot of people taking things like that. People on all sorts of concoctions of drugs. Mm-hmm. And I've generally when it comes to some of these harder drugs, I've got to send people back to their doctors, basically, to get some proper advice. I can't advise people to go stopping something like opioids overnight. That's a really dangerous thing to do. But when someone's really struggling with sleep, and I've offered them a way out, they seem to very often find the way to give up that drug, even something like an opioid, because the wish for sleep is so strong that I think it probably overcomes the need for the opioid almost. They're willing to cut down if it means that at some point they're going to get sleep in the future, and they do. And people have been on all sorts of antipsychotic drugs and psychiatric drugs. I'm not an expert in these. I'm not a medical doctor, so I'll always send people back to their doctors to get advice about this. But I've seen people give up some really nasty drugs, all sorts of combinations and concoctions as well. So yeah, people come to me with all sorts.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other interesting cases you run into, or difficulties, any psychological hurdles that people have? It seems like from your stories and other stories I've heard that people will have insomnia for years and decades, and it's amazing they go for that long. You could say, oh, your advice is common sense, but for some reason it just doesn't hit home with people, and they'll go for years, just like yourself, 15 years, without being able to get out of this vicious circle. So why? And I don't know, what do you think puts them in this situation?
What puts them in this situation, I think, is I suppose that when I say common sense, it seems common sense to me now because I can see how it works. But it obviously wasn't common sense for me for 15 years, was it? So common sense is probably the wrong way to put it, really. The reason this goes on so long, to come right back to the point I made in the beginning, the reason that insomnia can go on for 30 years or indeed even a lifetime is not it. People often panic when they hear that. They'll say, oh my God, you've said 30 years. And now I think I'm going to suffer for 30 years. But the reason that people suffer for so many decades is not does not have anything to do with the severity of their problem. It's not because they're more broken or their insomnia is worse or that there's something different about them. It is what they continue to do that keeps it in place. And basically what they continue to do generally is to give too much attention to the problem, literally to do too much about it. I know that it's a strange irony, because I realize I'm setting myself up here as a sleep therapist, but I'm telling people to pay no attention to the problem. I'm telling people to basically to try to forget they've even ever had a problem in the first place. I mean, that is the end point of my therapy, is for them to literally start willfully ignoring the problem, to reinvent themselves as a good sleeper. And good sleepers don't talk about insomnia. They don't think about insomnia. They don't take things for insomnia. And they don't listen to people like me either. So eventually, you basically have to turn your back on this problem. Once you've become a little bit better, you've got to take a step. I mean, I call this reinventing yourself as a good sleeper, but you've got to take a step in the direction of being a normal person, a normal sleeper. Normal sleepers do not research insomnia. They don't take sleeping pills. They don't tune into podcasts with sleep therapists on them. They don't subscribe to my email lists. They don't read about me. They don't buy more books. They don't do any of these things. They get on with their lives because they are ex-insomniacs now. They don't have insomnia. They're normal good sleepers. And once you can get that into a person's head, there's no way they're going to suffer for 30 years, because they've realized the mechanism by which they're keeping this in their lives. It's the attention that keeps it in their lives. Once you've sorted out the background things like sleep hygiene and a bit of relaxation, the only thing that keeps it in a person's life is the thinking and the attention that you're giving to the problem. Because
I guess every night you have a chance to, reinvent yourself. But I mean, it could be a fresh start, just like a good sleep will give you a fresh start for the day. You can give yourself a fresh start to sleep better tonight.
Absolutely,
even if you have insomnia, it can happen, no problem.
It can happen, and sometimes it can happen that quickly. When a person, for some people, the change can be almost instantaneous. I've literally had people say, I read your book and I'm only halfway through the book and I'm cured. I had the best sleep ever last night, and blah blah blah. And I think I haven't actually cured you. That's not what's happened. What's happened there? I haven't done that to them. What's happened is a light bulb has gone off in their head. I've made them realize something about their problem. And when that happens, sometimes the change can be almost instantaneous. It doesn't, of course, it's not always like that. I'm not going to pretend that every person's going to have an instant recovery like that. But when a person can get that click, that light bulb to go on, then they're not going to suffer for years. Yeah, they'll have a few bad nights here and there. They might have a little relapse of a little run of bad sleep here and there. That happens to everyone. It's even happened to me over the years. That happens. But once they've turned the corner and realized how this thing works, they won't suffer for decades. That's finished then. That this chronic insomnia thing is over.
What's funny is when you said that hearing about insomnia for so many years can scare people and make them think that they're going to have a problem for years. It reminds me when I was little, I saw stories in the news about people that, like the man that hiccuped for 30 years. So every time I got hiccups, I'd be afraid that what happens if it doesn't stop and I hiccup for 30 years. It just reminded me of that.
Absolutely. It happened. That's quite a common story. In fact, it happened to me. I remember early on in my insomniac career, when I was on breakfast television and somebody mentioned that they'd had insomnia for 30 years. And I remember it frightened the life out of me, because I remember just thinking, oh my God, do you mean I might never get over this? Do you mean this could go on forever? It didn't cross my mind that, that wouldn't be the case for me. People do this. People have remarked to me that certain types of insomnia are catching because they hear about someone else's story, and it's almost like they then their problem they take on someone else's problem. They'll hear about some completely different type of insomnia, like, oh, this type of this person, can only wakes up really early in the mornings. They fall asleep, but they wake up really early, and that might not have been their problem until that point. But suddenly they've heard about it, and then that'll become their problem because the mind is so suggestive like that. Just like you said with the hiccuping problem, but luckily you didn't. I'm assuming you didn't have a 30-year hiccuping problem.
No, but to this day, I still think about that every once in a while. It's very rare that it happens, but it's always in my mind when it does happen, which is sad. But
thank goodness it didn't. I guess it traumatized me, but luckily it never happened to me.
Yeah.
But stuff like that can traumatize you. It's weird. You don't think about it.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I used to worry, bizarrely, I used to worry about my hair falling out. I remember I used to see people with alopecia and think, that's going to happen to me. And the more I worried about it, I could almost feel my scalp tingling. It was like almost I could feel my hair falling out, and again, it never happened to me, but it's almost like I live in fear that one of these days it's going to happen to me, because I know the more I think about it, the more likely it's going to happen. So crazy.
Yeah, I've had to tell myself, I remember, in regards to sleeping, a few times I couldn't sleep, but I got better, obviously. But I had to tell myself, you've been falling asleep for 40 plus years. Why would it stop now? And that was kind of helpful to me to say that to myself.
That's it, basically. Yeah. You're born able to sleep. And, if you could sleep, if you've had any good sleep during your life, it's nothing breaks. There's nothing in there that stops you. There is no disease called insomnia. There's nothing you catch. There's nothing that breaks. If you've slept for 45 years, you can sleep again.
You think, I've heard a few people talk about it as if it's not a point of pride, but in a way it is. Have you ever experienced that where people, I don't know, they talk about it as if it's like this emotional crutch they've developed and that they have some sort of like perverse pride in it or badge of honor? I don't know.
In the insomnia itself, you mean? Absolutely. Yeah, I was one of them. Richard, I was one of them. I mean, I talk about this in the book, about the way you end up sort of boasting about your problem. I used to, you end up exaggerating it. And it's funny, the people who've written to me, and it makes them laugh sometimes to hear this, because they recognize it in themselves. You'll start to tell your insomnia story to someone you've just met, and you'll find yourself exaggerating and saying, oh yeah, I remember I used to say, I went 9 days without sleep. I don't know where that came from. I never went 9 days without sleep. I'd probably be dead if I went 9 whole days without any sleep at all. But I remember I used to repeat that because I wanted people to see that this was a really serious problem. This is not just some ordinary little insomnia. I needed to make people realize this was really bad. So I'd end up boasting about it. I'd end up exaggerating it. Didn't feel like lies, but I suppose it was really. And that, people have they get attached to this problem. It becomes like an identity for them. It's this is who I am. I'm an insomniac. I suffer. I struggle more than ordinary people. And you need to know that about me. I understand it completely. I was there. I know exactly how that feels, but it is so, so destructive. It's so harmful to your ability to sleep, to actually be creating this identity in your mind as that's just basically who you are. I'm an insomniac. That's me. I can't do anything about it. It's part of who I am. And part of my program is all about crushing that. Basically, I want that to crumble. I want that gone. That insomniac identity needs to go.
It's great. Yeah, you put better words to it than I could have. But yeah, it makes total sense.
And the funny thing is, I'm not the only one talking about insomniac. I talked about insomniac identity, 10 years ago when I wrote that book. But can I remember the reference? Probably not. I think it's the University of Alabama, possibly, have just released a doctor called Lichstein, I think he was called, has actually studied the notion of insomniac identity. There's actually medical research being done into this now, and they're discovering that people who have a strong insomniac identity, they suffer more whether or not they got more or less sleep than someone who doesn't have an insomniac identity. So the actual insomniac identity itself is almost causing you to suffer more. So you take two people with the exact same sleep, one who considers themselves an insomniac and the other one who doesn't. The one who considered themselves an insomniac will be having a much more miserable life, basically, and it will be affecting them a lot worse. Pretty sure the fellow's called Lichstein. Lichstein. I'm not sure exactly how, and I think it's the University of Alabama. If somebody wants to look up that paper.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you or get your books or your courses? What should they do?
Well, probably just go to the you can go to to the website, the Sleep for Life website. I have two websites actually. There's sashastevens.com, or you can go to Sleep for Life. That's sleepforlife.com. That will give you there are links there to the book and to the course itself, to the online video course, which is which is one port of call. Or you could just go to Amazon, search for my name, Sasha Stevens. There are 3 books on sleep. The one you'll probably want is the Effortless Sleep Method, which is the most famous and the most well-read one. Just search on Amazon or any other online bookstore and you'll find it.
That's great. Well, Sasha, thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Richard. It's been a pleasure.
You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you.